Welcome to Weekly Pulse. I'm Mackenzie Salmon. We may have just witnessed the most surreal week in American sports history, and that's not an overreaction. The sports calendar was getting ready to rev up, and then Utah Jazz's Rudy Gobert tested positive for coronavirus. And in the span of 24 hours, every major sports league put into perspective just how serious the coronavirus situation is for our country. The NBA, NHL, MLB, and MLS suspended their seasons. And maybe the biggest gut punch, the NCAA canceled March Madness. Our reporters cover it all, and I provide historical context on past events that have been canceled or impacted by outside forces. One of the few sports still planning to provide some escape from reality is IndyCar. We sit down with Josef Newgarden to preview the upcoming season. I also provide a little escapism as I predict where Tom Brady and the other top free agent QBs land. And hey, at this point, that's all we got. Let's roll. Sometimes our escapisms can't actually escape reality. Many sporting events in history have been canceled, stalled, or even altered in the past, whether it was from Mother Nature, terrorism, or human-created conflicts. COVID-19, or the coronavirus as many people know it, has forced countries like Italy, Iran, and China to take extreme measures to prevent the spread of the virus and for sporting events globally to take place without fans in attendance. So let's take a look back at some of the most unforgettable cancellations, delays, fanless events in sports history. Let's start by going all the way back 100 years. In 1919, the Spanish flu pandemic canceled the Stanley Cup Finals. The series ended up being called off after only 5 games, and it was the only time the cup was not awarded. 1980, the U.S. boycotted the Olympics in Moscow after Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979. The boycott had support from several nations, and the games had one of the most smallest turnouts in history. 1989, Game 3 of the World Series between the Oakland Athletics and the San Francisco Giants was postponed because of the Loma Prieta earthquake. On October 17th, right before the start of the game, a 6.9 magnitude quake hit the Bay Area. The series didn't start again for another week. 2001, the World Golf Championship on the PGA Golf Tour was canceled after the aftermath and shock of 9/11. And dozens of NFL, MLB, and MLS games were rescheduled at later dates. 2012, for the first time since its inception in 1970, the New York City Marathon was canceled because of Hurricane Sandy. And it took a lot to cancel the event, which still took place 2 months after 9/11. 2015, the Chicago White Sox and Baltimore Orioles played its first fanless baseball game at Camden Yards while the city was faced with riots after the death of Freddie Gray. The images from an empty stadium hosting a real Major League Baseball game were unlike anything we had ever seen. But in 2020, it may be the standard for the unforeseeable future.
This is USA Today's latest edition of What I'm Hearing. It's on the NBA suspending the rest of the season until further notice because of concerns about the coronavirus. Very, very weird day. The day started with the Golden State Warriors announcing that they would host a game on Thursday against the Brooklyn Nets at Chase Center in San Francisco behind closed doors after the city of San Francisco made it mandatory for all public events that would host at least 1,000 people to be shut off. The NBA was then going to be hosting a conference call with all 30 owners to go over different options as far as maybe hosting games behind closed doors or maybe postponing the season altogether. And then when the Utah Jazz and the Oklahoma City Thunder were about to start tip-off, they decided to halt the game after being alerted that Rudy Gobert was tested positive for the coronavirus, and that set down a trickle-down effect where the NBA quickly decided to suspend the season. There were still a handful of games being played on Wednesday night, but the Sacramento Kings and New Orleans Pelicans game was canceled abruptly because the NBA said that there was an official that worked that game that had previously worked a few Utah Jazz games earlier this week. So scary, scary events. It's not clear what the immediate aftermath is of where the league goes from here, when it'll start resuming operations. But for now, it's all about the public safety and trying to recoup whatever financial losses it's about to experience with ownership, players, and the concession workers moving forward.
In a move that was looking just inevitable, the XFL announced on Thursday late that it would not be playing its regular season games as other sports franchises started to suspend or cancel their operations due to the ongoing coronavirus fears and the trying to minimize the spread of the virus. This is just something that really made sense for the XFL to do, but I think we have to look at the language the league used in its statement. to point out a couple of factors here. Number one, the league didn't say suspend, didn't say cancel. It just said that it would not be playing its regular season games. I think we have to also look at the fact that it said regular season games, because I think the XFL, in an ideal scenario, would like to revisit, monitor the situation, and then hopefully come back and play a playoffs to generate some more enthusiasm in the rebooted league. Obviously, the XFL is a startup league. It doesn't have the experience, backing, or financial support, or even fan enthusiasm that other leagues like the NBA or the MLS or the NFL, potentially Major League Baseball, that they enjoy. So the XFL really, this is kind of a huge blow for them, because they needed this season to really get off the ground and hopefully, for their sake, generate a lot of enthusiasm and build some fan loyalty. Now, with the season basically suspended halfway through, we've had 5 games. That means that there really was a lot left for this league to do and to accomplish in its inaugural season. A couple other things to point out. I think this is clearly intended to show that there's financial stability and health in the organization, but the XFL said that players will be paid for their regular season salaries and their 2020 benefits for the remainder of the season, regular season, even though those games will not be played. And finally, the league did say that it was committed to returning in 2021 and playing a full season. I think that's optimistic. That's great that they have that mind frame right now. But again, because this is a startup league and a league that was, frankly, television ratings were on the decline anyway, we have to take a wait and see approach to see whether that comes to fruition. But a couple things. I will say that the XFL should have some things that it holds in high regard in terms of the 5 games that it did have. The kickoff, to me, was a resounding success. The tweaks that they made to the rule were something that I think made the play a lot safer, but still made the play competitive. And I think we also have to look at the way that they tried to reinvent the extra point and the point after touchdown conversions with the 1, 2, and 3 point attempts. The big thing also, though, is that quarterback play and offensive play in general really kind of struggled, aside from PJ Walker of the Houston Roughnecks. There really wasn't another star. You could say Jordan Ta'amu with St. Louis. He did play well. For the league to have a successful 2021, if it comes back, it absolutely needs to have crisp and high productive offensive play.
This NFL offseason could be historic for QB movement in the league. And it starts and ends with the GOAT, Tom Brady. Where he goes determines what will happen next, and in effect, he's the domino that sets everything off. So let's play dominoes. Our prediction for Tom Brady, Tennessee Titans. And here's why. Head coach Mike Vrabel. He's a former teammate. The team was 1 game away from Super Bowl last year, and they have a trio of young stars in Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Jonnu Smith, as well as a great O-line and a stout defense. Oh, and Nashville's hotter than Boston, Giselle. Our next domino to fall, Ryan Tannehill. He heads to the Los Angeles Chargers. He can start right away and keep the team at a competitive level. And if the Chargers draft Justin Herbert or Jordan Love, they can learn under his wing and sit their rookie season. As for the other former Titans quarterback, Marcus Mariota to the Chicago Bears seems like a great fit. He's someone who can push Trubisky in a make-or-break year, and if Trubisky flops, Mariota can come run Matt Nagy's offense efficiently. Like we mentioned before, with Brady gone, Bill Belichick needs a new QB, and Jameis has a new set of eyes. Yes, the Pats go all in on Jameis Winston, 1-year deal that is. It's a boom or bust potential, and if they bust, they can always go after Trevor Lawrence next year. As for the Bucs, Phillip Rivers would be a great QB option. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers is our prediction. First of all, Rivers resides in Florida. Secondly, Bruce Arians made magic with Carson Palmer later in his career, so he can get the same out of Rivers. And lastly, Rivers is cheaper and a slightly safer option over Winston. Switching over to the Bayou, while Drew Brees is staying, Teddy Bridgewater is on the move, possibly to the Indianapolis Colts. Everyone thought it would be Phillip Rivers in Indy, but Teddy Bridgewater offers a short and potential long-term option for the Colts at QB, unlike Rivers.
We're going to be waiting a little bit longer to find out if the proposed collective bargaining agreement is going to pass. The 32-member NFLPA Board of Representatives is down in Miami right now meeting, and they just passed a vote to extend the player voting by 2 days. Originally, 11:59 p.m. on Thursday was the deadline for players to submit their electronic ballots on whether they would approve or deny the proposed CBA. Now, that deadline has been pushed back to 11:59 p.m. on Saturday. The thinking behind it is, the last several days, there have been a lot of discussions in those player rep meetings. I'm told that the talks have been intense but productive. And the player reps felt like there's so much ground covered, they need to make sure that they have enough time to relay all of that information to their teammates. They want their teammates to be as informed as possible so they can know which way to vote on the new CBA. We'll find out what happens on Saturday. For USA Today Sports, this is Mike Jones, and that's what I'm hearing.
U.S. Soccer President Carlos Cordero's apology to the U.S. women's national team is too little, too late. Cordero apologized Wednesday night for a legal strategy that was misogynistic, condescending, demeaning, pick whatever awful word you want to use, and it was that. Cordero's apology only came after sponsors expressed their outrage, and the reaction was stunning. You normally don't see sponsors using words like offended, deeply disappointed, which is exactly what people like Coca-Cola, Visa, Budweiser, and Deloitte did. But worse, U.S. Soccer knew that this was their lawyer's strategy. It was clear in depositions that were taken months ago that the women were going to be portrayed as less capable and less skilled than their male counterparts. That's on Cordero. That's on U.S. Soccer. And that is what is not forgivable with just a simple apology.
The 2020 NCAA men's and women's basketball tournaments have officially been canceled. A move that would have been practically unthinkable at the beginning of this week, but in some ways became inevitable following Rudy Gobert, the Utah Jazz center, testing positive for the coronavirus, shutting down the NBA, and then the following morning, a flurry of conference tournaments shutting down. I think college sports, it might have been a little bit slow to the realization that this was going to be inevitable, that this is going to have to be how the season would end. Nobody wanted that. Certainly, people in college athletics wanted to give the players an opportunity to compete for a national championship, even if it was going to be without fans. And that was the step that they took on Wednesday afternoon, which was an appropriate step. It followed the facts on the ground, but those facts kept changing. And when you had the Gobert situation, you have to understand it's not just the danger of the coronavirus and the spread of it and the potential that the players would get it. It's the psychological impact. And for college athletes and coaches to see the scene that happened in Oklahoma City with Gobert, it shook a lot of them up. And in talking to coaches and administrators across the country today, it's very clear to me that it would not have been unanimous on every team to go ahead and play these games. So we are in the situation now where the NCAA had to make a move. March Madness is canceled. A lot of sports in college athletics across the country are going to be canceled for the foreseeable future. And obviously, this is unprecedented and something we'll never forget.
The NCAA tournament in 2020 has been canceled, and as you would expect, coaches and players have their reactions to it, obviously wanting to focus on the safety and the well-being of everyone involved in this. But there's also a bittersweet side of this. There's a lot of heartbreak when you think about a team like East Tennessee State. I had a chance to speak with Coach Steve Forbes. And this situation, it's one of those things where this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a team that could be a Cinderella March Madness type team, right? That caliber of bracket buster upset. To not necessarily have that opportunity the way that it shakes out, it's one of those things where it's a heartbreaking situation. I also had a chance to speak with Coach Ben Jacobson from Northern Iowa, and it's a similar situation. This is a bubble team with Northern Iowa. They were just waiting to see if they get in. One of the most exciting things for some of these teams is Selection Sunday. Do you get into the NCAA tournament? That feeling, that build-up, right now, that's obviously put on hold. And for some of these teams, that is a hard thing to take in. As much as there's the focus on well-being and safety, there is that heartbreak side of this. I'm Scott Gleason with USA Today Sports, and that's what I'm hearing.
Baseball became the latest sport to shut down. You'll be ceasing all operations in spring training and into the season. We'll find out whether the players will stay at spring training sites or go home. They probably will have the option. It looks like the season will certainly be delayed until at least mid-April, end of April, who knows, maybe even May. It's a situation now where baseball has to decide whether they'll try to make those games up or just cancel them and shorten the season. Remember the 1994-1995 players' strike The 1995 season was limited to 144 games. That's much more likely than trying to play games or extend the World Series into November, even deep into November, closer to Thanksgiving. So look for a shortened season and look for baseball to be shut down for the foreseeable future, perhaps much, much longer than anyone ever anticipated. This is Bob Nightingale from USA Today Sports, and this is what I'm hearing. The one team to keep an eye on is a sleeper, the Oakland A's out in the American League West. They're convinced this will be the year they finally knock off the Houston Astros. It's a team that won 97 games last year, but yet the Astros won again with 117 wins. The Astros are a team that won 311 games the last 3 years. But Bob Melvin, the A's manager, told me this may be the most talented team the A's have ever had. Certainly the greatest rotation under Melvin's regime. You've got perhaps the three nastiest lefties in the game, Jesus Luzardo, A.J. Puck, and Sean Manaea. Gold Glove infielders all across the diamond. Marcus Semien at shortstop, Matt Olson at first base, Matt Chapman at third base. Tremendous defense, perhaps the best defensive team in all of baseball. This is the year the A's believe they will finally win this thing, perhaps be the biggest surprise and win the World Series, at least get to the World Series. Remember now, talking to several A's players, they believe the Astros could be in for trouble in this sense where every time they go on the road, they're going to be booed, they're going to be taunted, they're going to be jeered. That has an effect over time, and they wonder how this Astro team will react to it. The A's are convinced this is the year. They believe they have more talent than the Houston Astros. Would not be surprised to see a 1988 rematch. Los Angeles Dodgers and Oakland A's. Well, contract talks had ended between the Cleveland Indians and Francisco Lindor about a contract extension. Certainly, it was a long shot at best that was going to work out. This is a team that offered Lindor over $100 million before the 2017 season, and now this is a man worth at least $300 million. The big question now is how long does Lindor stay? Cleveland Indians president Chris Antonetti said it's going to be very, very difficult to sign Lindor. They're talking about a small market, a superstar player. With the economics of today's game, makes it almost impossible to have a guy that's being paid about a third of the team's payroll. Lindor says he loves Cleveland, loves the fans, wants to stay. He says, come on, Cleveland Indians aren't broke. They got plenty of money. If they want to pay him, he'll stay. But he's not going to take a huge hometown discount either to stay in Cleveland.
You are the defending IndyCar Series champion. You've won 2 titles. This year, there's a lot of exciting new changes. The purse for the Indy 500 is up to $15 million, as well as the new Aero Screen driver cockpit safety innovation.
Yeah.
What can we look forward to for this 2020 IndyCar Series season?
Well, I think there's a lot of exciting change coming to IndyCar. You know, for us, probably the big known for people when they're watching is the safety innovation of the Aero Screen. You know, this is probably the biggest safety innovation in our sport in the last 2 decades, 25 years. We have not had a safety innovation like the Aero Screen. And really what that is, when you look at an IndyCar, it looks like a jet fighter. You know, it's like a little mini airplane, but put on the ground and turned upside down almost. It sucks to the ground instead of going up in the air. And with that, open wheel cars have always historically been open cockpit as well. So the driver's helmet has always traditionally been exposed in the IndyCar and that type of vehicle. So head protection has always been sort of the last frontier that we could change in our sport and make safer. And so by putting an Aero Screen on top of that area and really covering the driver's helmet, I think we're going to really increase safety, more so than we have done in the last 25 years. And the cars will look a little different. They'll look more like jet fighters, in my opinion, having that canopy on there. They're going to race slightly different because there's more weight on the car. The weight's more forward. So from an engineering standpoint, it's going to create a new challenge for us trying to get the most out of that race car. So yeah, new look, new feel, and I think a safer sport than we've ever had in the IndyCar Series.
Safety is, of course, paramount in all of motorsports. But when you look at Ryan Newman escaping severe injury, off his crash at the Daytona 500, you look at Robert Wickens, who unfortunately is paralyzed due to a crash at Pocono. How does it make you feel as a driver? I mean, does that come into play at all, or is that just completely out of your mind?
So when you look at the safety in motorsport, it's tough to deny that there's always an inherent risk. It's always been part of the DNA of racing that it's always a challenge. There's always a chance that things could go not according to plan, and there's a chance that things can go wrong. And they have before. It's part of the history and lineage of what motorsport is. I think that danger factor has always been, it's something nowadays that we want to shy away from. We want to make things as safe as possible. I think it's the responsible thing to do. But you can't argue and say, hey, this sport is bulletproof. It's 100% safe. It just never will be. But that's part of the risk factor that we take. It's it's sort of that gladiator approach that, look, we love what we do, and as human beings, we want to push things to the limit and try to get the most out of ourselves. We're not going to stop flying spaceships to outer space trying to explore new frontier. It's part of the human condition that we want to push ourselves to the limit and find new barriers to push through. So, with safety, we've come so far, and I think we're just getting better and we're making the sport safer. But when you strap into the cockpit of an IndyCar, you're always taking a little bit of risk. And as a driver, you have to be able to put that risk to the back of your mind and just focus on trying to go as fast as possible. Because if you think about that risk at all, you're not going to go as quick as possible.
When you look at the roster of drivers, you see the familiar faces, yourself, Scott Dixon, Tony Kanaan, Ryan Hunter-Reay, but you also see Oliver Askew and a couple of others. For those that haven't been following the offseason in IndyCar, what can fans expect in terms of the competition out there this year?
Yeah, I think what I like about IndyCar is that there's strong parity, and with that breeds excitement, it brings uncertainty, and I think fans have appreciated that about IndyCar. I think that we probably have the most, unknown results standpoint from a motorsport platform. You watch a NASCAR race, or you watch an IndyCar or a Formula One race. They're very competitive, and sure, there's top teams that can compete, and you don't necessarily know who the winner is, but I think when you look at an IndyCar race, you could take the entire field, and anyone in that field could win the race. And so I love that about our sport currently, is that you can be with the smallest team on the grid, or you can be the biggest team on the grid, and each team is going to have an opportunity to win, and you'll see that. And certainly now, like you talked about, we have new talent coming in, which has been really, really great for our sport. We got a Road to Indy system in the sport now that has really helped create a pipeline for young American talent to get to the top, such as an Oliver Askew or a Pato O'Ward. And that talent is bringing vitality to the sport. It's pushing the older veterans like myself, which is kind of odd to say, but it's pushing the veterans to be faster and get the most out of themselves. And you want to see the young guys, try and kick butt and get to the top.
Is there a dark horse this year that, could potentially dethrone you, that, maybe an Andretti or somebody like that, may come out of nowhere, that may give you, some pause?
Yeah, I think really any of the new talent right now brings a tremendous threat. Certainly if you look at someone like Colton Herta, who had a tremendous rookie season, I don't think he's going to slow down whatsoever. He's still very new and fresh to the sport. I think he's going to be a championship contender. So we look at him as someone that's always a threat now. I think Pato O'Ward is probably, to me, one of the most brightest stars that's coming into the sport. I think he'll be tremendously difficult to beat. So there's plenty of guys to look at that, if you're sick of seeing the old guys continue to beat everybody, I think you got a lot of young guys right now that can dethrone the top and make it interesting.
That's it from us at Weekly Pulse, your heartbeat to what's trending in sports.
Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and stick around for more from USA Today Sports.